What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Should the D-backs extend their star pitcher Zac Gallen this offseason? And looking at the third base options if the D-backs don't bring back a Eugenio Suarez.
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. On today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, we will be talking about Zac Gallen and whether or not he should be extended by the D-backs, looking at our third base options in case a Eugenio doesn't come back next season, and then, of course, the Randal Grichuk player review. So a whole lot I want to talk to you guys about today. I first want to say thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. All right. Let's get back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. And now let's talk about our star pitcher, Zac Gallen, and whether or not the D-backs should extend him this offseason. Because right now, with the way Zac Gallen has pitched throughout his D-backs career, right, the ceiling that he's shown us, we all know Zac Gallen is one of the best pitchers in baseball and the ace of the staff. And for this D-backs team, we talked about yesterday on the podcast about how they can be contenders for the next few seasons and how this core should be around for the next few years. But one of the only pieces on this roster that's not locked up through arbitration or a contract for the next 5 years is Zac Gallen. When you look at the rotation, Merrill Kelly and Zac Gallen are like really the only two core pieces that I guess also like a Christian Walker, they don't feel confident is going to be here the next 3 to 5 years. Probably more confident in like a Zac Gallen come back maybe than like Merrill Kelly, considering he's like entering his mid 30s. If you're looking at the next 3 to 5 years for the D-backs, but Zac Gallen, he is currently 29 years old. He is entering his final year of his contract with the D-backs, going to be a pending free agent in 2025. And I think we need to have the discussion if the D-backs should re-sign him and give him the contract extension this offseason and not wait till next year. Because the thing is, when you look at the pitching market and you look at some of those big time deals for star pitchers when they hit the market at age 30, a lot of those deals don't work out. Those big money deals. I mean, we saw it with Madison Bumgarner pretty recently, right? Like you've seen it. You see the Jacob deGrom deal. It's typically the deals that are like 6 years or more. Those are really the ones that seem to really bite teams in the butt. And when looking at Zac Gallen, I think we all love him. I think we all know he's a stud, a superstar pitcher, but I can't help but feel like it's bad business if you want to go out there and give him a 6-7 year contract and pay him around $30 million a year. I think teams are starting to get a lot smarter with how they handle these massive starting pitching contracts, because you kind of just go through like the last few years and the guys who got the 6-7 year massive deals, I think obviously those deals are the ones that haven't worked out. Now, the massive deals that only win like 4 or 5 years, those are a little bit more. Maybe they worked out, maybe they didn't. But any deal that went like 6 or 7 years was like automatic a bust. Like Zac Greinke with the D-backs, that wasn't a bust. 6 years, $206 million. But I don't know if he was worth the contract that he got with the D-backs. David Price, 7 years, $200 million, 30 annually. Back in 2016, I'm just looking at the 2016 class randomly right now. Like, I don't think he lived up to that billing either. Johnny Cueto in 2016 got a 6 year, $20 million annual contract. You just go through every single year, basically since 2016. Any starting pitcher that got 20 million annually and at least a 6-year deal, they probably didn't end up working out. Now, I will say Garrett Cole, that's for the most part has worked out for the Yankees, but like a Steven Strasburg, 7 years, don't like that. Patrick Corbin to the Nationals, 6 years. You definitely don't like that. Like, there's just some obvious ones. DeGrom, that was an obvious one, right? That was always one you saw it. And it's like, what are you doing if you're the Texas Rangers? And that was only a 5-year deal. But even the Carlos Rodon contract, he's looked really good in the postseason, but in the regular season, I don't think anyone felt good about the contract he was given out, considering his health history and how he performed in the regular season. Like, the risk is just so high when looking at the last 10 to 15 years with the guys who get 6, 7 year deals on those $20 million annual contracts. The risk is just way too high. I believe the D-backs should extend Zac Gallen this offseason before he hits free agency next year and he's another year older. I don't want to sign Zac Gallen 6 years, $200 million at age 30, or however, the annual contract is. If it's like 25 million a year for 6 years, like, I don't want to do that at age 30. But if we could sign Zac Gallen this offseason to a 5-year deal that pays him until he's like 34 years old, and maybe that's around 25 million a year, then I'm okay with that. Anything 5 years or less, I think I would be okay with. And the less years, the more money I'm willing to give Zac Gallen. For me, it's not about the annual salary. It's more about the length of the contract. And when you look at starting pitchers, they just break down so quickly as they start to age. Yes, you have the exceptions like the Verlanders and the Scherzers who seem to just keep going year after year. But for the most part, you look at a lot of these deals, and you don't even have to go to a free agency. You just look at someone like contract extensions for guys who re-sign their own players. And it's like, you really don't want to get into the business of handing out big long-term contracts to aging starting pitchers. That is where you get in trouble. D-backs didn't give out a long-term contract to Madison Bumgarner, but we obviously saw aging pitcher giving big money to, and at the time it wasn't like insane money. It was 15 million a year, and even that was way too much for Madison Bumgarner at the time. And so for the D-backs, hopefully you learned from that lesson and said, let's not go after the guys in the decline. Let's not go after the aging pitchers, right? Zac Gallen, not in the decline at all. Doesn't seem like an aging pitcher, but year 4 of that deal, year 5 of that deal, you might start looking a little different. And that's why you can't give out deals that go to year 6, year 7, because the drop off, a lot of times it's not gradual. A lot of times it's like a cliff. One year you're great, winning the World Series, and then the next year you can be absolutely terrible. Just like we saw with Jordan Montgomery going from World Series hero to Madison Bumgarner in the span of about 6 months. And so it can happen to you quickly. And so for the D-backs, yes, re-sign Zac Gallen this offseason. Get ahead of it while he's still young. Lock in the core that we have now so he could be in the mix for the next few years. But be smart about the deal. No long-term money. And if you're going to overpay him, make sure it's a short-term contract. And now we'll talk about the third base options for the D-backs if Eugenio Suarez does not come back to the D-backs in 2025. But hey, if you want to do some daily fantasy sports and try to win some money, then the best place to do that is going to be Prize Picks, because Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less and at least 2 player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So go download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code LOCKEDONMLB. Prize Picks, run your game. All right. Let's get back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. And let's look at what would happen, worst case scenario, if the D-backs do not bring back Eugenio Suarez next season, because I've talked to you guys a bunch already on this podcast about Eugenio Suarez. the season he had for the D-backs, right? The 30 home run, 100 RBI season after having Evan Longoria last year, who, again, go back and look at the first half of the season for Longoria pre-injury. He was not bad. He was actually doing his job and providing power. But after he got hurt, statue second half of the season, really couldn't move that well down at third base and just provided no sort of offense down the stretch, especially in the postseason. And we really haven't had a good third baseman since we traded Eduardo Escobar, right? When he was able to provide some pop and power for us in 2021 and 2022. And so D-backs really could have used a good third baseman because it's something that they typically like to have on their roster. It's something that they haven't had a solid corner piece at for a long time. And I still don't think Eugenio is your long-term answer at third base. But for right now, he is a very strong option, especially considering the rest of the market. And that's where we kind of got to start because Eugenio in the vacuum, very good baseball player. The power that he provides, he does everything that the D-backs need from him. When the D-backs acquired Eugenio last year, the biggest thing that they want from him is what he did this season. Provide some pop. That was the big thing where all their offseason moves, getting Jock Peterson, getting Grichuk, getting Eugenio. D-backs needed more pop in their lineup. And for Suarez, it was like, we'll take the strikeouts as long as you hit some big bombs. And of course, we know that first half of the season, not too many bombs for Eugenio, but in the second half, he really turned it on. And now the D-backs are in a place where we have to bring back Eugenio, not for just the season he just had, but also for the options that are out there that are just not as good as Suarez. Because when looking at the free agent market this upcoming season, there's really, is there anyone better than Eugenio Suarez on the open market? There is one guy you can make an argument for, but I feel like he might be more name value than actual production at this point of his career. And he might be more expensive than Eugenio because of that said name value. Because Alex Bregman, the guy who's finished second in MVP voting back in 2019, where guys, he's been good since then, but he hasn't been elite since 2019. He's been a good baseball player, a borderline all-star, but he's not the superstar he was. In 2019, 2018, Bregman was a superstar, one arguably the best third baseman. And now it's like, yeah, he's probably top 10 third baseman. He's probably top 10. I would have to go through the list, but he's probably top 10. But he just had a season where less home runs, less RBIs, slash line across the board. Like Eugenio just straight up had a better season than Alec Bregman. And if I'm looking at like the market value for both of them, Eugenio club option for $15 million. Like Bregman is projected 30 million. That's his market value according to Spotrac. I don't know who's going to go out there and give him 30 million, but that's what he's projected. Bregman's secretly not that old, only 31 years old. He feels like an older guy. And so if you're the D-backs, it's like I could have Eugenio, who probably had the best season of all of any of these third base options. I could have him for 15 million, or I could go out there and get aging decline Bregman for double the price tag. Like, I don't think the D-backs are doing that. So if you're looking at the third base option, it's like, who's out there that's better than Eugenio Suarez? Probably Alex Bregman, but he also might be double the cost of Eugenio Suarez. So is there anyone out there who is not as good as Suarez, but maybe you could pay him half the contract? Like maybe he's like 85% Suarez, but only half the price. Is there a player like that on the open market that you could get for the cheap? No, that guy's not even out there. Maybe if this was coming off the 2019 season where Yohan Moncada was an MVP finalist, not finalist. He finished 21st in MVP voting, but in 2019, Moncada, 315 average, 915 OPS, 25 bombs in 132 games. He's a free agent this year. Yeah, if we were entering the offseason after his 2019 year, I would be like, look, guys, let's go get Moncada. He's younger, he's dynamic, he's got power. I might have chose Moncada over Eugenio. But since then, Moncada has been a pretty mediocre baseball player dealing with a lot of injuries, a lot of ups and downs. And Suarez is clearly better than Moncada. And then after that, like your options really, really start to fall off. Gio Urshela, like I wouldn't mind Gio Urshela as like the Kevin Newman replacement backup infielder, but full-time infielder for The D-backs at third base? No. Abraham Toro? Is he even still in the league? Like, there's really no one out there. And to be honest, if the D-backs wanted a third baseman, let's just say hypothetically, D-backs were like, I don't know, $15 million? Can we really afford that? We didn't get the playoff revenue this year. The D-backs declined that, and they really didn't want to pay that $15 million price tag next year and wanted a cheaper option. Then you either go the trade market, see who's out there that's arbitration that maybe could get for the cheap, or a veteran for the cheap, or you just go internally. If you do not bring back a Eugenio Suarez, I think it's time to just go young. I don't know why the D-backs wouldn't bring back a Eugenio. I don't think there's any reason for them not to, outside of let's just be cheap. That would be the only reason they don't bring it back. But if he doesn't come back, then I think you just scrap all those free agent third basemen. Don't go after any of them and literally just go youth movement. Lawler and Perdomo, you now have the left side of the infield. Get a little Blaze Alexander in there as well. And then that would be it for me, because as it currently stands, the third base options for free agency were absolutely horrendous. It's going to be hard to trade for someone good to replace that production without giving up someone of value. But also, you never know. Honestly, baseball, I mean, we got a Eugenio for nothing. That was a dump off to the D-backs. So maybe we could do it one more time. But after the season he just had, the second half he just had, he really ingratiated himself well with D-backs fans in the second half of the season. So D-backs, I think, are definitely going to pick up that club option for a Eugenio Suarez, and I'm very excited to see him back in a D-backs uniform in 2025. And now we'll talk about another player I want to see back in the D-backs uniform next season, in Randal Grichuk, in segment number 3. But hey, guys, I first need to talk to you guys about hymns. This is a message for the dudes because, guys, sometimes intimate moments happen spontaneously, and we always want to be ready so we can perform in the bedroom. Hims provides access to treatments that can help you stay hard and last longer, giving you that boost of confidence so you can be ready whenever the mood strikes. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mint and Viagra and Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's hims.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatments. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compound products, which are now approved or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details on important safety information. Subscription required. Prices vary based on product and subscription plan. All right. Let's get back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. And now let's do the Randal Grichuk player review, because when doing this was actually probably the hardest person, because as we're doing all offseason the podcast, taking one person at the end of the pod and doing a player review, strengths and weaknesses from 2024, then setting up goals and expectations, for 2025. And for Grichuk, to be honest, when looking at his strengths and weaknesses, found a lot of strengths, and to be honest, there was not a lot of weaknesses for Grichuk based off the season he just had with Arizona. I will say this: Jock Peterson, stud year, monster year, but I've seen him be very good before. Eugenio, I've seen him hit 49 home runs before. The guy that was honestly the biggest surprise to me this offseason, outside of Jordan Montgomery and Erod being complete busts, Randal Grichuk in the season he had, because I always thought he was like a fine baseball player. I thought he was like slightly above average. Like, I was like, he's solid. He plays in Colorado. Like, I didn't think much of him. I'm like, he's a Rocky getting helped by Coors Field. I was like, he's fine. He's like probably like a fourth outfielder in Major League Baseball. I didn't even think he was that good. He blew away my expectations this year. To be honest, Randal Grichuk should have played like 145 games. Grichuk straight up was maybe the best D-backs outfielder by the numbers. The slash line will tell you that. Obviously, you'll probably take Corbin Carroll over Grichuk, but Grichuk, like in a vacuum, take the names away. Look at the stats. Grichuk should have played more than Lloyd Gurriel. I really like Jake McCarthy. He had a great season. So that one actually might be a little bit closer because Jake McCarthy definitely had a 2-month stretch where he had to play in the lineup. But again, I know Pavin Smith was fine, but Randal Grichuk should have been playing over Pavin Smith, guys. Listen, I know Pavin Smith was hot for like 3 weeks. Guess what? Randal Grichuk was hot for the whole season. Like, that's the thing that frustrated me so much. Guys, I know Pavin Smith was playing really well down the stretch, but guess who was playing really well the whole season? Randal Grichuk, and it was impossible to get him playing time this season. And maybe that is the biggest strength, just his attitude and his work ethic, because if I was Grichuk and I was putting up the numbers he was, and I was like the 5th outfielder on the depth chart sometimes, like I would have been pissed. So let's go to the strengths and weaknesses of Grichuk from this past season, because one of the strengths is that he was a balanced hitter. It's one of the reasons I'm so upset he didn't play more. We know he was brought in to be a platoon guy. He crushed lefties. Guys, that's what he was brought in to do, and he did that. 319 average, 914 OPS against lefties. But even against right-handed pitchers, 801 OPS in 57 games. You know what? 6 home runs in 94 games against lefties. 6 home runs in 57 games against righties. He has as much power against righties as he does lefties. Still 800 OPS against righties as well. This is the thing with Torey Lovullo. He just looks at righty versus righty matchups, lefty versus lefty matchups. Such like an old school philosophy. People think I don't like Torey Lovullo because they think he's too locked into analytics. My problem is it feels like he doesn't use analytics enough. Sometimes the numbers scream. The platoon matchups don't matter. Sometimes you'll go with the righty versus lefty, and the righty will actually have worse numbers against left-handed pitching than the left-handed hitter versus left-handed pitching. And he won't care. He'll just be like, it's a righty versus a lefty. I got to do it. And sometimes it's like, look at the actual numbers. It's actually tell you it's more advantage to go lefty versus lefty. Yes, visually it doesn't look right, but sometimes things just happen where guys are locked in at the plate. And Jake McCarthy was like that for a while, right? With how he battled against left-handed pitching. That's how he was able to get playing time. I just don't understand why other guys on the roster, like how many times did we see Jock Peterson get subbed out because he was going to go against a left-handed pitcher, or vice versa, Randal Grichuk? I wasn't upset when they swapped out for each other, but sometimes it's like, we're putting this guy in for Jock Peterson right now, who is just clearly not as good, and you're only doing it because he's a right-handed at bat. Those kind of things are what made me really upset this season with the D-backs. So I just had to get that quick rant out there, because honestly, when you go through these Randal Grichuk numbers, you're honestly more upset that he didn't play more. Like, it's insane, the stats that Randal Grichuk put up. Like, we talk about how Pavin Smith was hot in the second half. Randal Grichuk had a 10-12 OPS in the second half of the season, over a 300 average. In the month of September, he had a 400 average and a 1,400 OPS. How did he not get more playing time? Absolutely don't understand. When he came off the bench this season, best pinch hitter in Major League Baseball as well. As a sub, as they say, this is what he's considered. As a sub off the bench, 333 average, 991 OPS. As a starter, he still had an 847 OPS. Like, Grichuk was so good. We know he was clutch. We talked about it with Jock Peterson. Grichuk might have been the clutchest player on this team this season. 1051 OPS with runners in scoring position. 944 OPS in high leverage moments. 2 outs and runners in scoring position. 1478 OPS. The game, 7th inning or on, within a couple runs, 1388 OPS. Like, no matter the type of situation, late in the game, runners on, clutch situation, 2 outs, it does not matter the type. Randal Grichuk was absolutely clutch this season for the D-backs. And again, just go take 5 minutes and go look at the Randal Grichuk splits. Absolutely insane. It really doesn't matter. Grichuk dominated this season for the D-backs. Fastball killer. 333 average against a fastball and a 587 slug. Even a 543 slug against the off-speed pitch as well. Grichuk had himself a monster season offensively. I have to talk about the things that he needs to work on, it's not much from this past season. He really had such a good year with the D-backs. 875 OPS this season with the D-backs, like a 291 average, 12 home runs. Like, how did he only play 106 games? It doesn't make any sense to me. His two biggest weaknesses might be the breaking pitch. 217 average against the breaking pitch, needs to be better against that. And also, he was not very good in the ninth inning. Like, every inning, Randal Grichuk was pretty good in, except for like the ninth inning. And it's like, okay, that's fine. It's such like a weird minutia thing. Sub 200 average in the ninth inning. It was the only inning he had a sub 700 OPS. Like, fine, okay. He had 21 at bats in the ninth inning. Fine, he wasn't good in the ninth. He dominated every other inning. He batted 480 with 1300 OPS in the first inning. So I think he made it up. I think he made up for his struggles in the ninth with his ability and production in the first inning. So when thinking about Randal Grichuk for next season, my goal for him, just like Jock Peterson and a lot of the players in the D-backs lineup, just come back next year and run it back. Jock Peterson had a fantastic year. Randal Grichuk had a fantastic year. Suarez had a fantastic year. Hell, the whole lineup had a fantastic year. Just run back the dang lineup. Grichuk had a fantastic season. If I had to set up goals and expectations for him for next year, get more playing time, please, because he was so good. I'm just sad. I don't feel like we're going to bring back Grichuk because it's a mutual option. It's not a lot of money for Grichuk in the season he just had. I think he can get an upgrade in both playing time and contract with another organization. So I'm sadly already going to start doing my farewell to Randal Grichuk, but I pray the D-backs re-sign him this offseason. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back next week for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Deuces.